Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us for our live event. My name is Mark Hudson, CEO of Squirrel365, and today I'm joined by my colleague Donald McCormick, our Chief Strategy Officer. Now we're going to be recording this live event and it's going to be available to you all later today. Now we will have time for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if you do have any questions that come up during Donald's presentation, please feel free to use the chat panels or the Q&A panel in Zoom to ask your questions, and I'll collate them for the end of the session. So let's get started. Now, more and more of us are moving our business systems to cloud apps and looking at ways to automate repetitive tasks to make better use of our resources. Before cloud, in order to integrate our business systems, we would typically have to engage developers to assist. This could end up being a lengthy and costly process. No-code platforms are looking to solve this problem by making it easier to build apps, automate workflows, and integrate business systems. Squirrel365 is a no-code platform for the spreadsheet community. It harnesses your spreadsheet skills to easily let you build apps for both web and for mobile. All this is done with clicks and not code. Now, Zapier is at the heart of workflow automation. It seamlessly allows you to automate workflows and connect your cloud application, all done once again with clicks, not code. Today, we're going to be showing you how the Zapier and Squirrel365 integration that we recently released in 1.8 of our product can allow you to automate your workflows and integrate your cloud business apps, all without writing a single line of code. Let's see how this is done. Over to you, Donald.
Mark, thank you, and welcome everyone to the webinar, wherever you are in the world. As Mark said, I'm sitting here in quite sunny London. But you can't tell that because I could be anywhere. But anyway, so as Mark said, what we're going to look at today is how you can automate your world with Squirrel365 and Zapier. And you'll be glad to hear, in common with most of our webinars, we are light on slides and heavy on demo. In fact, if I look at the agenda here, we're going to what Squirrel365 is, because however we describe it, you probably won't really understand it. It's something new and fairly revolutionary. So we'll do a demo, just a basic Squirrel to understand what it is. Then we'll introduce a use case for it, which requires Zapier. So we'll introduce Zapier to another demo. But then we'll talk, as Mark talked about, no-code apps. So, well, yeah, what have spreadsheets got to do with apps, and how does Squirrel bridge that gap? Well, we'll look about apps and add more to our Zapier demo as we go with that. And then at the end, we'll look at a few more possibilities. In fact, for a very good reason, I say there are over 3,000 possibilities you've got here, and we'll look at why that is with another demo or two towards the end of the presentation. So the first thing is, what is Squirrel365? Well, Squirrel365 creates interactive visualizations and no-code apps from your spreadsheets. Because you won't have seen anything like this before, or those obviously who have seen Squirrel will understand what this is, but anyone on the call who hasn't seen Squirrel before will not really understand, because it's so new, because it's such a new concept. The idea of being able to build apps, being able to build visualizations directly from the logic in your spreadsheets is so new that this statement isn't nearly enough to understand really what it is possible to do with Squirrel. So what we will do is go straight into a demo about what is Squirrel365, introducing you to the basic concepts, which will then really set us going further into the Zapier integration as we go on through the webinar. So what is Squirrel? This is Squirrel. So this is the Squirrel designer, and this allows me to take a spreadsheet and turn it, first of all, the first thing we're going to do is turn it into an interactive visualization. Now, you ask, well, why would you want to do that? Well, there are many reasons that people will use Squirrel, but one of the things we see time and time again is what we call value calculators. These are calculators that marketing and sales teams use to articulate to prospects and to customers the value of their offering. And what they want to do, and often these are sitting inside Excel spreadsheets like the Excel spreadsheet we have here. So Data Secure is a fictitious online backup company. And what they want to do is to be able to let people understand how much their transfer time for their backups will be reduced if they use Data Secure, and particularly if they swap between various Data Secure plans. So they have this Excel spreadsheet. Now, anyone who's done anything with Excel before will not be at all surprised or confused by anything in this spreadsheet. It's a very straightforward spreadsheet. The yellow here shows me the things that I can input. So at the moment, I'm saying I want to transfer 500 gigabytes on the super plan, and that's saying that backup would take 4 days and 26 minutes. If I say I'm going to just type that, megabytes is the alternative. So I say it's actually 4,000 megabytes, 500 megabytes. I click on there. It's now obviously down by a factor of 1,000. And so it's gone down to 16 seconds because that was 16,000 seconds before. I might want to say change the plan. So rather than super, I can go to type in standard, and that goes up to 400 because obviously the speeds are less in the standard plan. Now this is, again, I said this is very straightforward. Very straightforward Excel. It's basically sort of got a format. It's taking the number of seconds, the number of seconds, dividing it by the number of seconds in the day to get an Excel time, formatting it with this format string. I say all just basic Excel, and to get those seconds, it's looking up the various things. So it's working out from the value in the units, and it's getting this speed here by a simple VLOOKUP on the table, depending what I type in here, so that you can, it goes there. And then here is, rather than using a VLOOKUP, it's using an if statement to find if it's megabytes or gigabytes. So again, it's the sort of spreadsheet that most people on this call will have written, will maybe have lying in a drawer, so to speak, around. And it is a classic thing that people are doing with spreadsheets, as I say, to try and articulate the value of their business. Now, the problem here, there are two significant, well, actually three significant problems with this. One is you don't really want to be sending Excel spreadsheets. Messy, I have to type in this, I can make mistakes and all that sort of stuff. So it's not very appealing. You're at this point, you're in a sales process, you want to appeal to people. This isn't, I mean, yeah, you can pretty it up a bit in Excel, but you have to distribute it. They have to get the Excel file. It's not that nice to use. They're too easy to mess up. I mean, yes, you could put drop downs on here and stuff like that, but it's not the best mechanism for doing this. You want something on the web, just come to a web page and do this. And also what you want to do typically in these is you don't want to give away your logic. Like the underlying logic often is deep, sort of, it's about your business. It's about how you calculate value. And often you want the end users, to your prospects, to see the output for them. But you don't want them to be able to click and see all the formulas and how you're calculating that and start to second guess your pricing plan or whatever it is. You want to sort of like protect your intellectual property in there and just distribute the answers. So we're looking for something that looks nice, deliver on the web, and can hide your intellectual property. And that is exactly what Squirrel allows. And we're going to build a calculator from this in the next 2 or 3 minutes, because it really is that straightforward. So you say there, this is transfer calculator.xlsx, put that away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into Squirrel and import that calculator. So it loads the spreadsheet file. So now I have this same calculator, but sitting inside Squirrel. Now in Squirrel, and if I make changes in here, so it's a real companion for Excel. So I'm not sort of taking it out of Excel and there's no way back. If I make changes in here, I can re-export that Excel file. So it's not like I'm sort of like a one-way street. But one of the great things about Squirrel is that whilst I'm in here, I have a full spreadsheet at my disposal. So again, I could sort of go to here and say, change that to megabytes, and hey presto, it's all being calculated in here. So I don't have to go back to Excel to make changes and re-import, which would be really painful. I can do it all in here. But at a point where I say, well, actually now I've got an updated version of the spreadsheet, I can save it back to Excel. So we can stay with Excel being the primary model for anything that we do. So now I've got the model in here. What I want to do is to essentially create a web-based front end for it. And the way we do that is we just pull components out of our tray here and pull them onto the canvas. So for example, very simple one to start with, I'm going to take a text label and I'm going to make that the title of this project. And so it's really going to be called Secure Plan Calculator. Now I could type it in here, plan calc, just type that in there, and it changes, and I can make maybe make that 30 instead and make it bold so it's a nice title. But actually the magic of Squirrel happens, and if there's one thing you take away about how Squirrel works, this is it, is rather than typing it in here, I can say, get your value from the sheet. So what you're doing is you're setting a property of the object in the UI from a value in the spreadsheet. And that is the magic of Squirrel. So if I click on here and say, I want to go in there, then hey presto, I've got that there. If I change this in here, if I was to go like that, it changes. So it's now dynamic to what's in the spreadsheet. And as we go along, you'll see just how crucial that is to the enormous value and the amazing things that you can do with Squirrel. So, okay, so I got a bit of text on what's going to become my web page. It's not that big a deal. So the next thing I want to do is I want to start allowing the user to input more easily into this model. And so we're going to target, the first one is the value of the amount of data. And so what I'm going to do, another component I've got here is a slider. So I can pull a slider on, maybe make it a little wider here. And then what I can say is actually these go up to 1,000. So I'm going to make the maximum 1,000 here. And I'm going to say, again, the magic is in the linking of the components of the spreadsheet. But this is sort of double magic, if you like. All this did is said, well, display what's in the spreadsheet. That's not that interesting. But now I say, I want you to link this slider to the value in this cell here. And having just done that, watch what happens. I can now, if I go into debug mode, what I do is I see this calculator working and I see what's going on in the spreadsheet underneath. And I click on here. Now watch, when I move this, watch what's happened to this cell and these cells down there. They all move. So I'm now affecting the spreadsheet logic using an interface component in my project here, my front end. Now, obviously, I'm seeing what's going on under here. What would happen, what I would see when I deliver this, and we'll see how we deliver it and publish it to the web a little later on, that's what the user would see. They would just see that. And so they don't see the logic. They can't see it all calculating. They just see the outputs. But obviously, there are no outputs on here, so we need to add some of those. So what I'm going to do is add another text label here. Again, I might make it bigger, make it up to 30, and bold it again. Oh, no, bold. There we go. And this time, what I want to do is this is going to be it's going to be a piece of text which is going to tell me that. In fact, I'll label it so you know what's going on. So this is, I'm going to say, estimated transfer time. So that's the label for this, and that estimated transfer time again is just going to be bound to the spreadsheet. So I take that piece of text in there. So now when I that, now what the user's saying, we're getting into here, so I start saying, well, as I go from megabyte at 0 to 1,000 megabytes, that's my backup time changing there by an algorithm that I don't have to disclose, but is working in the background for me. Obviously, sort of the megabytes, it doesn't get very large. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, well, actually, what I want to do is I want to choose whether it's megabytes or gigabytes. I need another type of control for that. So you can start to see why we talk about building apps here, because I'm going to put a control in that's a drop-down. And that drop-down is going to select just from data in the spreadsheet, megabytes or gigabytes. That's what it's going to show when I drop it down. And I can say what I want it to say initially, and I'm saying I just want it to show megabytes initially. So there you go. So now I have megabytes and gigabytes I can choose. And I remember I typed it into the model here. Now I'm going to use it for the dropdown. So how do I do that? Again, it's what we call data insertion. I'm going to say I want to take the label that is selected by the user in here and pop it into this cell here for megabytes. And again, come to preview. Notice this is gigabytes. It's 4 hours and 26 minutes for gigabytes. Again, it moves up and down, or I can go to megabytes. So there, I'm starting to sort of to see this grow in front of you. And remember, I had none of this. All I had was a spreadsheet to start with. And in like 2 or 3 minutes, we've got the guts of something that you could put on your website or send a link to someone that they could start to really understand the offering here. The last thing I want to do here, and because the last input that you can have to the model down here, is what type of plan you're on. And the plans are standard, super, and lightning. And so what I'm going to do here, rather than, so we've had a slider, slide that up and down. We've got the drop down to say what it is, that whether it's megabytes or gigabytes. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a radio button so I can select one plan or the other. And I'm going to put these across. I can just do it like that and space them out a bit because I want to go across there. And I'm going to say, yeah, they're driven again from the spreadsheet, and it's going to be standard, super, like that. So I get those choices. And again, I want to say the initial selected item is going to be the label standard. So that's my starting point. So again, I come in here, I can now choose between those. And all I need to do to involve this control here, this radio button in my in my model is to do a bit of data insertion. Again, I'm going to take the label and I'm going to put it into there. And so now what we've got the full calculation model capability here. So I can say, okay, so I'm going to go to gigabytes and I'm going to go up there. So I've got 7 days, but if I go to super, it's only 7 hours. If I go to lightning, it's only 1 hour and 51 minutes. So I can very quickly and easily, so you can see lovely interface. Well, we'll pretty it up in a minute, but it's a really usable interface. It hides away the complexity of the formulas, it hides away the intellectual property of the formulas. And we can, as we'll see in a minute, we can take this and deliver it to the web so that people can just use it without really knowing that it came from a spreadsheet or anything like that. Obviously, we want to make this a little nicer if we're going to deliver it over the web. Then, so the first thing I can do here is if I go and select all of these, then I'm going to move them down and make space for an image. So I'm just going to have my corporate logo up here, make it a bit broader, and I can say get it from a file and import it, and it's going to be that my data secure logo up there starts to make it look a little nicer. I can maybe start to change the colors of things. So this text color I'm going to make sort of red like that. I can copy the value of that and maybe make this the same color down here, so we can start to add colors across the piece. And also in here, I want to have to accentuate my plans, so I can come in, and the capability which we also added in 1.8 along with the Zapier stuff is the ability to add a logo, so or to add icons. And so I'm going to have the play icon for my standard. Again, maybe make that the red that we had before. And then if I copy and paste this across here, super, change the icon to something fast. That fast forward will do, and then something other for the lightning, again light, and we'll have this aptly named Zap logo there given the nature of this. And we can do all the things that you would expect. So I can maybe select these three here and then line them up horizontally and all that stuff. So now I have this this calculator. You can start to see it working in there. And so that's as I say, I've created that from scratch. Now with a little, we got to get onto the Zapier stuff, so a little extra time, and probably only 10 or 15 minutes, if that, is you can, if I'm going to one I got earlier, I've just made it, well, I say someone else took it, because I've not got such an eye for detail. Someone else took it and spent about 10 minutes making it look a little nicer. Other things we've done here, two other things that are quite interesting, other than putting extra text on it, as well as the slider here. So I've got the slider that I can move up and down, and you see it changes this number here. But this number also allows us to go, because if I get down to say maybe it's only 58, it's quite tricky to do it with the slider. So I can just click to 58 in here. So I can do fine adjustment here and broad adjustment there, but it's affecting the same value in the underlying model in the spreadsheet. And remember, again, we can see all of this happening in the spreadsheet as we do this. We can see what's happening maybe as we change plans and check the logic, but the end user will only see the finished thing that looks like this. And this is starting to look like a really nice piece of web content that you could deliver. One other thing I've done here, which is nice, again, it gives you a flavor for the sort of things you can do, is if I just pull up this a bit, you see I've got a color here. So the color for like that line there, rather than typing in a color or picking it here, it's been bound to this cell here. And so I can put the RGB values, the hex values in there, but I can also type names, the CSS names for colors in there, and they're all linked. So this line, this slider, these icons, and this text. So if I was to change this to say, let's say lime green, then you can change it to that, or yellow. So you can see what it would be like. So it's a really nice way of testing out what it is in it, but it was Indian red before, because that's the color that matches our logo up there, because this logo came in from an image. So just a nice sort of extra there in here. But what's the point of having this value calculator and allowing people to use it on your website, or just, I say, just by sending them a link, if I can't get their details? So I want to use this as a web capture form. So I'm going to extend it out, and I'm going to say what I want to do is I'm going to, and again, as I said, I can save this out to Excel at any time. So I'm happy doing changes in the sheet here. So I'm going to add a new sheet, and I'm going to rename that as lead form. And what I'm going to do is I want to capture the name, email, and company from somebody, from the person who's using this, but also the scenario and what they've selected. So how many megabytes or gigabytes they're looking for and which plan they're considering as a bit of extra information I want to capture along with their details. And these three here I'm going to make yellow because, like in here, the inputs into when the interface is writing into the spreadsheet, we make it yellow. So I'm going to make that yellow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some text inputs here. So this text input is going to be the name. And I'm going to, again, is this binding? So and that is, I can't emphasize enough how powerful it is when you click this button. So I'm going to say this input box is going to go into name. And then I'll create a second one, just copy and paste it. And that's going to be the email. And that's going to put its value in here. I just noticed that I can't type. Then email. And again, I'm going to type that down here, and that's going to come from that cell, which is obviously the company. So I'm now collecting information that's going to be written back into the spreadsheet. The third one is the scenario. Now, what I want in there is values from the model. So I can do that just using sort of spreadsheet Excel skills. So I say equals, and then I go to my calculations, and I'm going to say it's going to be equal to that value. Actually, no, yes, that value. And then I'm going to put and add in the megabytes, and then add in a little thing that says plan and standard, like that. So there we go. You see I've got 300 megabytes plan standard. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'll put that like that, put the colon there, and I'll just add is that right? There, data 300 megabytes plan standard. So, and again, because I've connected that to the model, you'll notice what happens when if I run this, you'll see that updates itself. So it's a reflection of what the user has selected. So I'm going to send that away to my lead capture system, along with the name, the email, and the company there. So now what I need to do is I need to be able to push that out somewhere, and that's where Zapier comes in. Because if we go back to the presentation, what we see is, well, what is Zapier? Well, as Mark said, Zapier is workflow automation and integration. And what it allows you to do is to connect together web-based apps. And now when I publish a Squirrel model to the web, it becomes a web app. And so now I want to connect it up to Zapier as a web-based app, and then Zapier is going to take it on to maybe connect with one of these. And Google Sheets is the first place that we're going to do this, because what I want to do, the simplest example is I want to connect this up to Google Sheets, so that every time I get a lead, it's written to a line in a Google Sheet spreadsheet. And indeed, the Google Sheet spreadsheet that I'm going to be working with is this one here. So it's called Calculator Leads, name, company, email, and so on. I mean, the most simple spreadsheet you could possibly want. And we're going to start writing details every time someone enters a lead in our Squirrel project. So how do we do that? Well, the way that we do that is we have to add in here a connection. And the connection here we've got down here is a Zapier trigger. And so this is going to zap the data. They're called zaps. It's going to zap the data out to Google Sheets. So I have to say, what do you want to zap? And so I'm going to zap these 8 cells. And I can do it in rows or columns, but it's here. I've got the headers, which say it's going to identify each piece of data to Zapier, includes the header row, which we've got, and then give your my lead zap, I'll call it. Now, what we need to do is to register that with the Squirrel Cloud. And that gives me a unique key which I can copy. So I've now got it all set up in Squirrel, so that every time I trigger this, and I'll come back and do the trigger mechanism afterwards. But now what I can do is I can come to here and I'll go to Zapier. So I've logged into my Zapier account and I want to create a zap. Now this is going to do the work of taking the data from Squirrel and writing it to the Google Sheet. So I'm going to say, well, what's the trigger going to be? and so I just search in Zapier. So we are in the Zapier catalog, and we want to choose the squirrel trigger, and then we continue. So he said, well, what's the key? So that's just the key that I got from Squirrel that identifies uniquely that model in the Squirrel cloud. And so now we come in and we can see here, actually, yes, but you can see here that I've got name, email, company, and scenario are the four things that I'm passing in here. So that's what I expected. Now, where do I want to go? Well, I want to go to Google Sheets. And what's the event there? Well, I want to create a spreadsheet row. And then, so I have to choose an account, and I've previously logged into Zapier with my Google account, so it's there. Otherwise, it would just pop up for ask for my credentials, and it says my credentials are encrypted with Zapier and they can be removed at any time. And then I say, right, well, what do I want? So I've got that. That's calculator leads is where I want to, and I'm going to put it in the first sheet, which is the only sheet in there. So now it's got name, company, email, and scenario, and it's got that from the headings from the Google Sheet. So I can say, well, in name, what do I want to do? Well, I want to put the name. And then in company, I want to put the company. And then in email, I want to put the email. And in scenario, I want to put the, I can find it, put the scenario like that. So I've just wired it up. It's all, as Mark said earlier, it's all point and click. I can test that. And so we now should see a row value 1, value 2, value 3 with this data into the Google Sheets. And so if I come in here, there we are. That's the one that's just come in. That's the test one. I can delete that because I don't want it anymore. And come back to my Zap and turn on my Zap. So it's now active and live. So if I come back to actually, I call it Webinar demo. Then we'll see it in my list of Zaps. There, Webinar demo is on. So now what I can do is if I come back, if I run this, actually, no, the next thing I need to do is I need to wire it up so that it knows when to send that in. So after they've the users entered that. So what I'm going to do is add a button, and that button is going to be the trigger for the Zap. And so it's going to, the button's going to push a value in there. So I've got a button. So that button I'll push on here, and that button is just going to be called request quote. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cell here, and when it pushes the button, it's going to push it into that trigger cell. And what am I going to push? I'm just going to do a simple formula equals if that is 0, then it's 1, otherwise it's 0. And the reason for that is that means if this is 0, then that's 1. If that's 1, that's 0. That means this is always different. So every time I push this button, this will change. And that's important because when I come into Zapier, when the cell changes, I want that there to go. So that button now should allow me to push that Zap and push it into the spreadsheet. So if I come in and preview and say Donald, me at fred.com and Fred Feedco, and I click request quote, that should now have triggered that Zap. So if I come back to my Google Drive here, there you go, Donald Feedco. So it's taken that lead and put it into Google Sheets for me. And so wherever this goes, this now is, and you'll notice there that said 300 megabyte standard plan, which is here. If I take this up to 810 in the Lightning plan, and then I sort of say, I could say new Donald and click this again, then we go back to my sheet, and we notice there new Donald, and it's 810 in Lightning plan. So it's genuinely capturing what I'm doing. It's amazing what I've done in less than 15 or 20 minutes. I've built a front end that captures a lead based on a model that's a value calculator out of a spreadsheet and posts it into a Google Sheet so that you can use that as a lead capture system. So you can call these people or email these people and say, hey, you were looking at the Lightning plan. Are you interested? You want to take this further? Let me give you a quote for it and all that sort of stuff. So it's remarkable what we've been able to do just in this simple example with Zapier and Squirrel. But that's that's what Zapier is. But then what about apps? I talked about apps, and we've seen a bit of the app sort of stuff, but actually you can get really quite sophisticated with with Squirrel. Now, if you want to see the peak of sophistication, I would recommend you go and watch an on-demand webinar we did last year with Ziv Barzili from Salesforce, who has written the most remarkable app. It's a value calculator on steroids, and if you're interested in how far you can push Squirrel, I'd go and watch that webinar. It's up on our website in the Learn section under sort of events. But we're going to do a little bit of that now, just to give you a flavor of what's possible. Because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, well, actually, no. What I might do first, before I do that, is show you a little bit how you share this. So obviously this is, I've been running this in the designer, but when I preview this, I can now say I want to publish it, and publishing it to the cloud so it's then available to anyone is as simple as publishing to the cloud here. And I can say this is my lead calculator, and then I'm going to just click publish. And that publishes it up to the Squirrel Cloud. And so then I come in here and I'll see all the projects that I've previously published to the cloud. I can make that live. So that's now a live project that I'm using. And I can now open this in a browser. So this here, I'm opening in a browser. It's completely independent of the Squirrel Designer. And again, I can in on the web.com, and me just randomly put things in there. Now I'm just in a browser here. I click request quote, and again I come back to Google Drive, and I see that has updated there. And indeed, what I could do, I can share this and embed it. So what I can do is share this by the link, so I can give the link out to people. And in fact, if I go to the chat panel here, let me just put that in there. Let's go to everybody. So I can, if you were to click on that, you will see this as well. So you can have a go, and if you click the update button, then it'll post it into my spreadsheet. I can also post this in PowerPoint. Sometimes you want to put these in PowerPoint. You're doing a presentation, you can host it in PowerPoint. But actually, most interestingly for this sort of thing is the embed code. So I can now take this and I can embed it as part of my website. Whether maybe I'm using WordPress, or I've got a self-built website or whatever, I can use this link and this little iframe snippet in order to be able to put it in my website. So I have genuinely created a piece of website content which captures leads into a Google spreadsheet without any coding whatsoever from a spreadsheet in about 15 minutes. It's when you step back to think about what it is, that is really quite remarkable. And if we come back to here, so yes, and Mark has done this. So there, Mark's going the Lightning plan with 690 megabytes. So he's just clicked that link. So it's now I've freed it out onto the internet. So that's how easy it is, not just to build them, but to share them. So then, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come back into here, and I'm going to open another one, which is just, again, I'll take these and stylize them a little. So you see it's a bit nicer. And what I'm going to do is, there are a couple of things here. The first thing is we're asking for a quote. Now I've got to ask permission to email. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a checkbox in here. And the checkbox is just going to, the text label on the checkbox is just going to say, I consent to email contact. Might want to put something friendlier, but that'll do for the time being. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to consent. Oh, consent in there. So I'm going to say this unchecked or checked. I'm going to write into there. So what we'll notice here is if I run this in debug, it switches this between checked and unchecked. So I know the state of that. I want it actually to be off to start with. So I'll say unchecked there. Now what I want to do, and this is where it gets really nice, is I don't want this button to be active until they've checked. I don't want a submission, because that would violate all sorts of laws around the world. So what I'm going to say is this quote button here is going to be disabled when this is equal to unchecked. like that. So now when I go and debug it, it's off until I check it. So I can uncheck it and check. So when I consent, I can then send my details. You can start to see that we're sort of changing the user interface. And in fact, I could, the other way I could do that is rather than saying it's, I can make it invisible. So if I say this is when this, I only want it to be visible when it's checked, then we see it doesn't even appear, but then I do, and hey presto, I get it. Right? Whichever way around you want to do it is entirely up to you. The point is the flexibility that you have here is really quite enormous. And just one extra that I just thought about, well, it was a demo that I saw that actually our Chief Experience Officer Mel did, is the ability, sometimes you also want to prove it's a human being. So like you want to take a captcha, and the captcha is typically a little sum. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, and this is just to bring home that it's just Excel logic that's doing this. So think about this. I want a number, a random number. Well, if I type in here, rand between standard Excel function, and that's going to be between 1 and 10. And then the second number is going to be the same, another number between 1 and 10. Now, what I want is a piece of text that asks that. So the text is going to be, is just going to be equal to that and a plus sign and that. So it's 7 plus 9. And the answer is just going to be equal to that plus that, which in this case is obviously 16. And then the entry, what the user enters, is going to go in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little box up here. So the first box is going to be a text. Well, the first thing is going to be a text label, and that's going to give me the challenge, as it were, the captcha challenge, which is just this piece of text. 7 plus 9. We can make it go over here, so make it a little smaller because it's not that important. And then the second thing I'm going to do is to put an input box, and so we've got that. That input box there, and that input box is going to insert its value into here. Now what we're going to do, and actually the styling here is going to be answer like that. So what we've got there is I can type in my answer, and then what we're going to do is up here, you see that we had the consent is checked or unchecked in this entry here. Well, actually what I'm going to do is for the button, I'm going to say what we had the button here was that it was enabled on this checked. I'm going to sort of change that slightly. So I'm going to say enabled there, and enabled is going to be equals if consent equals checked, and actually we better do that in here. Let me just get this up here. If, and this is just how you do an and a sort of Boolean operation in Excel. So that and that equals that. Yes, that's okay. So if it's all right, then on, otherwise off. So there we go. So now I want to say is that this button is based on that state, and I want it to be disabled when it's off, like that. So there we go. So now I've got this, and I can, if I consent, that shouldn't come on. I should be able to type this, which is 16 in there, and have to consent that, and then I get to there. Let's see why that's not working. I don't know. Sorry, I messed up. But you get the point. What we're doing here is we're just using Excel logic to be able to make the user interface in here. So it really is quite sophisticated where you can get to based on the just on your normal spreadsheet skills, and that understanding, as I say, that magic of being able to connect the components and their properties on the canvas to now use in the spreadsheet. So the final thing we want to look at is I talked about 3,000 possibilities. Well, the 3,000 possibilities are the 3,000 things that Zapier connects to, the over 3,000 things that Zapier connects to. So if I come back to Zapier and we go and explore, you see that sort of they talk about automates over 3,000 apps. So for example, one of the things I might want to do is rather than write to a Google Sheet, I can write to Pipedrive. Pipedrive is an online CRM system. So I've got a Pipedrive here, which is just a fully functional CRM system. I've signed up for the 14-day trial, and I want to connect that same lead capture, but I don't want to capture it in Google Sheets. I want to capture it in Pipedrive. So what I'm going to what I've got here, if I come back to Squirrel, is I've got one of these. I open my Zap to Pipedrive, which is basically almost exactly the same, only it's got a different trigger. It's got a trigger with the 808, that's the 808 code there, and that's hooked up to Zapier. Let me just come in here. So if I come back to Zapier, I've got to Pipedrive. So I come in here, it's exactly the same. So I've got my Pipedrive account here, my Pipedrive Zap here, and so again, the trigger, it's that 808, so that's being triggered by that in Squirrel. And in exactly the same way as I did to Google Sheets, only it's now, I've chosen an account which I logged into, and then I set up an action, which is to, which was to create, sorry, the event is to create a person, and the action just maps the values into there. And so when I come into Squirrel here, if I run this here and I say Donald Newco Donald at 123.com, and then I have to obviously do the answer and click my consent. And so then I click that, that's now sparked that Zap. And so if I come back to Pipedrive, what we should see is there, Donald and my Donald at 123.com. So it's added it into a completely different application. Before it was Google Sheets, and now it's into Pipedrive. And there's almost no end to what you can do. So for example, maybe what I want to do in here, if I take this same to trigger two things from this one action, so I can come in back to Zapier, and I'm going to create another new one, again, because it's just so remarkably easy to do. So I'm going to say, I want that same thing to trigger. I come in here, Squirrel, I choose an event type, and that is the trigger. I configure it, so I put that key in there now, and I continue. Now the action this time is, I have to test the trigger to get the values in, but that should be okay. There we go. That's my demo data. Continue on to, what I want to do is go to Teams. So I can go to Microsoft Teams and choose an event, and the event is I want to send a channel message. Again, I've already previously logged on to my Teams account, so it's got my credentials. I come in here, I say which team is going to be the, and it comes up with this, where are we? I need to choose a team first. There we go, Squirrel365, choose the channel. The channel is going to be, if I can come down here, I had new leads. And then the message in here is going to be the name, a few spaces, the company, a few spaces, the email, and the scenario. And in fact, I might want to put some text on here, new lead arrived, like that. So now if I go and test this, and test and continue, then if I bring up my Microsoft Teams here, we'll see that test lead has arrived in here. Oh, sorry. The test lead has arrived. Let me just make this bigger. Hold a bit. New lead has arrived. Sophie Raptor. That's all the data that was test data. But if I come back finally to here and I run this again and I say Donald Teams, because it's going to go into Teams, company, Wondery, and then email address is donald@wonder.com. Again, I have to do my captcha and consent, and I click my button there. Then if I come back to Teams, I didn't click the button properly. If I click the button, and we come back here, And oh, I know what I haven't done. Apologies. I need to turn this Zap on so that it's actually active. There we go. And if I come back to here and now I click that, then I come back to Teams. And hey presto, new leads arrived, Donald, Teams, Wondery, one it all, and the values from the model. So a lot to cover there. You can, if you stop after just creating your calculator in Squirrel, that would be a great use of the product. But then we went on to look at Zapier, integrating, taking the leads from that, putting it into Google Sheets, turning it into more of an application with the UI, configuring to what the end users were doing. And then at the end, we use the power of Zapier to put it into Pipedrive and actually to put it into Teams at the same time, because what you'll notice, the very last thing I'll show you is that if I come back to Pipedrive, you'll see that Wondery.com was posted. I'm posting to both Teams and Pipedrive with the one action from inside Squirrel. So a huge, just a vast number of possibilities it opens up, having added that Zapier integration. We've run over a little, apologies for that, but I will hand back from Mark and answer any of the inevitable questions that have come in. Thanks.
Thanks, Donald. Excellent presentation. Yeah, firstly, John's asked, could you just pop up that Google Sheets? I think a number of our attendees have added some details. So if you just pick up your Google Leads sheet, and yeah, you can see that Anubhav, who is Bob and testing, and Mickey Mouse and John have added their information to there. So just to show, it was a completely live demonstration, no code involved whatsoever from start to finish by Donald, and you all interacted with that live content whilst he was presenting. So thanks for that. Yeah, on to the questions. So Anubhav has asked, are you using the native Excel engine inside the Squirrel interface, or is it a custom engine?
It has to be a custom engine. The reason for that is that it has to, because when you publish these to the web, they are pure web apps. There's no Excel there. So what we do is we have replicated pretty faithfully. I mean, we do a lot of testing to make sure it's the same. So when we bring in an Excel model, it calculates all the same things. We have coverage of about, I said 3/4 of the functions, about 400 functions that we cover. And the ones that we don't cover are really niche sort of engineering style things. But if people really need them, we can add them. So no, it's not Excel itself. It's something that looks like Excel. But the fact, I'm quite pleased that you had to ask the question, because it means we've done a good job in making it, because we want it to be as close to the Excel experience, because we want people to be able to use it naturally and smoothly. But it is our own engine, because that has to be like that for when we deliver on the web.
Fantastic. Anubhav also asks, are you using the native Excel engine inside the Squirrel? Oh, sorry, that's the right. I've just asked that one. Does Squirrel365 require you to have Excel installed on the host computer? By host computer, I think Anubhav means the designer that you're designing the Squirrel apps on.
In fact, Squirrel doesn't require Excel to be installed anywhere in particular. The only thing you need is the XLSX file. So in fact, you don't need Excel at all. You could create all your spreadsheet in Google Sheets, export it as an XLSX, and bring that into Squirrel. So it's entirely independent of Excel. So no, you don't need Excel to be there at all.
Great. Another question from Anubhav. I notice you have Google Sheets as a connection in addition to Zapier. Is that an alternative? Would Zapier be the recommended way to extract the action to Google Sheets?
So that's a very good question. So we have a Google Sheet and Excel connectors. We have actually also connectors to other databases. For Google Sheets and Excel, those connectors are currently read-only, so we can read data from Google Sheets and Excel, but we can't write to it. So if you want to write to those things from Squirrel, then you need to go through the Zapier route. We may add to that in the future, but because Zapier opens so many things, they show over 3,000 different connections. We did that as a starting point, and is a great way of writing to Google Sheets and Excel.
Great, fantastic. I think that's all we're going to have time for. We've run over by 5 minutes, and thank you all very much for joining us today. As I said at the start of the webinar and the live event, that we will be sending out the recording as soon as that's been processed to you later today. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us on the connection information that's on your screens at this moment in time, or just send either Donald or myself an email as well. I'm Mark at squirrel365.io, and Donald is Donald at squirrel365.io, and we'll be pleased to answer your questions. So thank you all very much for your time. Thank you, Donald, for yet another enthralling presentation, and wish you all a good rest of the day. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.